Hello everyone and welcome to the Armageddon game from the final round of the Champions Chester Finals. Let me just switch the little the letter on the little robot so it doesn't say rapid. Sorry about that. And it's a really wild game because in order to get the black pieces, it's always better to be black in Armageddon. You have to bid your time because players start with 15 minutes and you can bid as much time as you want. You can bid a minute, you can bid 2 minutes, 5 minutes, but then if you win the bid, you will have a much less time on the clock when you start the game. So, you know, it's nice to bid a lot, but of course you will have less time to play. And Alireza won the bid here, and that's why he got the black pieces, which is it looks to be weird because, when you start learning chess, you are taught that it's always better to be white. Not so much in Armageddon, because now it's okay for Alireza to draw, and he wins the match. The first two games that they played were absolutely wild to watch. I will not analyze them as they're it's more of a joy to watch them actually play it than to analyze it, since it's really fast and there are so many mistakes. The first game is a real blunderfest, so if you have a chance and you have time, do check it out. So Alireza won the first one. Second game, Magnus retaliated. He really went all out with the black pieces and played a very nice game. But now it's time to see what happened in the Armageddon. So let's check it out. Magnus has the white pieces and he opened with pawn to d4, and Alireza replied with d5. I allowed the clocks for this video. And you can see he starts with 9 minutes. I think he bid like 8 minutes and 58 seconds, so considerably lower time. He starts with 6 minutes less. So let's see if this is enough for Magnus to win the game. We have pawn to c4 and now pawn to c6. The Slav defense, and it quite a lot rides on this game for Alireza. If he loses the match to Magnus now, he's out of the tournament. We have pawn to e3, we have knight to f6, and now knight to c3. We have bishop to f5, so a pretty standard Slav defense setup, and now pawn to f3. An extremely rare move, and it is what Magnus has to do in order to get a nice game. And now Alireza plays pawn to h6, and it is now as of move 5 already that we have a completely new game. Yeah, sorry about that. And now Magnus rushes forward with pawn to g4. He attacks the bishop here, bishop to h7, and now bishop to d3, offering a trade of bishops, which Alireza happily goes for, captures, and now pawn to e6. Knight g to e2, continuing development. The knight might end up somewhere like f4, maybe d3, maybe e5 in the future. Knight b to d7, and now c captures on d5. We have c captures on d5, and the bishop to d2. Alireza goes pawn to e6, grabs hold of the b5 square, prepares further expansion with pawn to b5, and h4 by Magnus. He starts attacking on the king side. Pawn to b5, and now king to f2. Not even castling the king will be safe here. Magnus wants to attack the black king still in the center of the board. We have bishop to d6, and now pawn to g5. Knight to h5, of course you cannot capture here, as if you capture, then just h captures on g5, and you have big problems here. For example, you trade rooks, rook captures on h1, and now you have to deal with the threat of pawn captures knight, and also the threat of rook to h8 check. And if you play knight to g8, something like rook to h8 and king to f8, the defending, then queen to h7, and you resign here. There's no defending this position. So instead, after g5, knight to h5 by Alireza, and now pawn to e4. So first playing on the king side, and now striking in the center. Magnus trying to control the entire board here. D captures knight, captures, attacking the bishop, bishop back to e7, and now even pawn to a4. So really using the entire board. The idea is to put pressure on b5. He wants to capture, win a pawn, and can Alireza stop this somehow? Well, our good friends the engines, they taught us that whenever someone does something like this, you should play the anti-positional move and you should be okay, but humans just don't do that. So Alireza played knight to e5. It's a nice tactic as the knight cannot be captured. The queen on d3 is undefended. So queen to b3. Still putting pressure on the pawn, and now we have knight to c4. So very tricky, going after the bishop on d2. So bishop to b4, and now Alireza has to decide. The best would be to play bishop captures on b4, but it's still, or maybe even rook to b8. But to give you an example of what happens, captures, and queen e7. Okay, you can trade queens, queen to c5, and this is how you force a queen trade, because black cannot castle. The queen will be hanging here, and if you trade, then Magnus will get a passed c-pawn. So that's the idea. But Alireza went pawn to f5. He wants to go after the white king as well. Bishop captures on e7, queen captures, and now knight to c5. And how do you defend the b5 pawn? There's really not a good way to do it. Now you can't even capture here, as the knight on c4 would hang. You cannot even defend it. If rook to b8, you play knight captures on a6. If you play, what can you play? If you bring the knight here to defend it, then you lose the e6 pawn. The knight is blocking the queen from attacking the pawn here. So Alireza says, all right, I can't defend it. Let's just leave it there and, try to beat me with an extra pawn. And Magnus says, all right, it's not just an extra pawn, it's an extra b pawn. So a captures, rook captures on a8, rook captures, and queen captures on b5 with an attack on the knight. Knight to d6 attacks Magnus's queen here, and queen to b3. Again, introduces the attack to the e6 pawn, and rook to e8, Alireza defends it. And now Magnus has the passed b pawn, but also he has a very unpleasant pressure on the g file. So rook to g1 threatens g captures on h6. So Alireza quickly gets away from the g file. Knight to d3 now. Remaneuvering the knight to f4 and pawn to g6, not allowing the advancement of the white pawn to g6. We have knight e to f4. Queen to b6 is also very nice here, but Magnus is also playing a little bit on Alireza's time. He's down to 3 minutes, and Magnus has over 10 minutes on the clock, so he doesn't want to overuse his time. Knight e to f4, knight captures on f4, knight captures, and h captures on g5. H captures, and now knight to f7. And it seems like Alireza figured out how to survive this position. Magnus played queen to e3, again putting pressure on this pawn, with some ideas of even advancing the pawn to d5, and now Alireza just went for knight captures on g5. Probably rook to b8 was just safe as going after the b pawn, and then after rook to b1, you take it from there. But he went for knight captures on g5, and now Magnus plays queen to e5. Again, d5 here is very nice because you can never capture. If you capture, then queens just get traded off the board, and the knight on g5 is undefended. So instead, after knight captures on g5, Magnus went for the queen to e5, and now knight to f7, attacking the queen. And now we have rook to h1 check, king to g8, and queen to b5 now. Just keeping the queen on e7 as the rook would hang, also defending the pawn here, preparing to advance it. It's a nice position for Magnus, the g6 pawn still hanging. So king to g7 defending, and now queen to c6, just applying more pressure here. G5 chasing away the knight, and now knight to d3. Also rook to g1 does look very nice, but Magnus went for knight to d3, rook to d8, and now queen back to c3, trying to throw in some discoveries here. So queen to f6, and now knight to c5. Again, going for some checking action here once the pawn is advanced. So king to g6, unpinning from this long diagonal, and now rook to d1. Magnus puts the rook behind the d pawn, and now pawn to e5. Here, the position is still okay for Alireza. He has to play rook to d6 or something like g4, and okay, it continues, but he played pawn to e5, and this is very, very dangerous now. But he's very long time. He has less than a minute 45 seconds on the clock. So d captures on e5, queen to h8, and now as he defends the rook, we have rook captures, queen to h2 with check, king to e3, and now he has to recapture. Knight captures on d8. We have king to d4 by Magnus, and now pawn to g4. And how can Magnus win this? Well, he can't really if Alireza plays everything correctly. F captures on g4, and now you have to play F captures on g4, recapturing. But Alireza threw in this queen to f2 check, and this is just enough to get Magnus into the winning position. King to d5 was played, and only now f captures on g4. Now we have pawn to e6, advancing the pawn. Queen to f5 with check. This is the final mistake for Alireza. We have king to d6, and now queen to f3, offering a queen trade, but it does seem little good. Queen captures on f3 was played, g captures, and now knight to d3, going after the pawn. King f6, and now we have pawn to e7. Knight to f7 check, king to d7, and here Alireza played pawn to f2, but he was also in this position on move 51 that Alireza Firouzja lost on time, and that's pretty much it. Which is a huge shame. Because this is one beautiful position. It's not easily winning. I mean, you really have to work hard to win this position, but it has a very, very cool theme that I'm sure you guys will enjoy. So even though the game is already over, feel free to pause the video and try to find the only winning idea for Magnus here while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding this, well, inconceivable set of moves. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is pawn to e8 with knight check. That's the move you have to play, and that's the only move that wins. Now, the reason why this is so is because if you capture the pawn on f2, then look at this, knight e5 check comes. Then you move the king, king d8, then knight to c6 check comes. You lose this pawn. And now after king d7, knight captures on e7, and yes, you do have a passed pawn, but the knight will simply sacrifice itself for the pawn. It's not like you can do anything, like knight g4 check, king f7, you can even move the king back, and let's say you start pushing pawn to b4, knight d5, attacks the pawn, b5, now comes knight to c3, again attacks the pawn, b6, knight to a4, again attacks the pawn, and finally b7, knight lands with c5 check, forks the king and the pawn, and once the king moves, of course, you will capture the knight, the pawn with the knight, and it will be a draw by insufficient material. So that's why after this pawn to f2 move, the only winning move is e8 knight check, and then after the king moves, now you capture the pawn. You have to capture it, otherwise you're gonna only get a draw. But it's still not easy. How do you prevent the black knight from still sacrificing itself for the pawn? Well, look at this sorcery. King to e5, you will play knight to d3 with check. King to d4, now you will play knight to d6, knight to d6, offer a knight trade, king captures on d3, and now you will play knight captures on f7. And even though the black king is so close to the b pawn, the black king cannot capture it. If you go to c2, then just b4, and the king can never catch up to the pawn. You cannot go c3, and if you try king to c4, trying to play king to b3 next, and king captures on b2, then knight to e5 check, king to b3, and knight to d3, defending the pawn. So there's no way you can do it. If king to c4 attacking the knight, b4. Now you want to give up the knight, so the pawn marches forward. The king will not be able to catch up to the pawn. And if king b5, now you start, shouldering off the black king. King c7, king c4, king to c6, force him to capture, and now the b pawn wins the game, as it most often does. Really cool game, but I was very sad that it ended here, because I very much wanted to see would Magnus be able to pull this off, because he would have to find some very unique moves. And okay, he had time on the clock, Alireza didn't, but if he made one little mistake, then he would not be able to pull off a win here. But yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Very nicely done by Magnus, kicking out Alireza out of the event. And yeah, if you have the time, do check out the first two games. Like I said, they're not really something to analyze, but they are a joy to watch when they are actually playing them. So yeah. Once again, really hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank David Gasparian, Nathan, I love you, Dad, Miloš Knešević, Treats for Medo, and David Kimura for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.